Hi, this is my review of the Dungeon Under the Mountain level 10. This is a virtual box set, and currently this is probably the last level in the Dungeon Under the Mountain Mega Dungeon level collection. This virtual box set contains the entirety of level 10, which is a huge level, but you also have sub-levels that can be used with this level 10 connected to this main map through staircases, secret passageways, but you could also use them with any of the other Dungeon Under the Mountain maps, or with any other maps in your collection, be it commercial maps or homebrewed. Now, let's talk about the quality. The quality is great. The maps are bookmarked, the rooms, corridors, and symbols are quite clear, and you have the Rule the Dungeon button that will enable you to hide the numbers from the different rooms. You could also hide the furniture, activate and deactivate the grid, the teleport areas, the water areas, the main areas, the secondary areas. You can activate and deactivate the black fill in the walls. You can also toggle between white and yellow color. And you can activate all or just some things and deactivate some other things. You also have a legend with the symbols that are commonly used throughout the entire level 10 and the sub-levels. And you also have a summary, which is basically a division of the different zones of the level 10. So you can click on any of those zones or sections, which are basically little squares, that will take you to that particular section right away. Now let's talk about the contents. This virtual box set contains tables to generate some random things as the players navigate the entire maze. Because, for example, maybe the players hear something. Maybe they hear muffling sounds from a nearby wall. Or maybe they hear a distant explosion or a creaking sound of fire burning. You also have a table to generate smells. Maybe there is a smell of burning incense. Or maybe it smells like almonds, or perhaps decay. You also have a table to generate some other features, like for example, maybe the players find a man-sized mirror that reflects man as some other type of species. Maybe the player characters find a human finger bone with some sort of band wrapped around it. Or maybe they find a statue of a beautiful woman that speaks. This virtual box set also contains templates for level 10 and the sub-levels. This is very handy. You have an area where you can write some notes, maybe related to what the room contains, with information related to what the player characters have accomplished within a certain room, some of the enemies that they have killed, maybe some allies that they have gained in the different levels and sub-levels. So this is great to keep track of things. First, let's talk about the main level. This is probably the most dangerous level in the Dungeon Under the Mountain. There are many areas with some magical zones, some ritual chambers. You can also see many statues, some burial chambers, some labyrinthine sections as well. You also have some hub areas. Maybe they will be useful for the players to regroup, perhaps find a place to camp if needed. But there could also be some centers of danger and dread. Maybe there are some sort of cursed effects within them, or maybe the enemies are actually moving about these central hubs. You also have many different places where you can teleport, perhaps to other sub-levels or even lower or higher levels within the Dungeon Under the Mountain. It depends on how you're handling the entire mega dungeon. You also have different rooms and corridors that connect with each other, sometimes in obvious ways, but there are also secret passageways between the different rooms and corridors. Perhaps you can only move through these different sections through magical means, maybe through spells, or through some artifacts that you can find within level 10 or the sub-levels, or perhaps by using some of the items that you have found in other levels in this same dungeon, or perhaps in other dungeons if you are having a campaign where the player characters are moving inside and outside of the Dungeon Under the Mountain and visiting other adventure sites. There are also some large pools. Perhaps they connect with other waterways within this dungeon complex. You also have different staircases. Many of these different elements can be used, even for example these pentagrams, perhaps as teleporters or gateways, to move between level 10 and the other sub-levels and levels. I think that something that is highly flexible in level 10 is that you cannot find this dungeon tailored or geared towards a specific type of faction or species. Perhaps you have several factions here. Perhaps there is some sort of crazy archmage or a lich or a vampire that is actually running the entirety of the dungeon under the mountain. Now let's take a look at these sub-levels. You have sub-level 1, the grotto. As you can see, this is a very natural looking type of area. You have all of these different passageways and caves, tunnels. It's a perfect place to populate with some beasts, magical creatures, and perhaps some non-player characters that are specialized in moving in this underground type of environment. Perhaps some druids, some spelunker type of non-player characters, or some sorcerers and warlocks that are looking for magical reagents within these tunnels and caverns. You also have level 2, which is the temple, perfect for clerics and necromancers, mages. Perhaps you could add a shaman or two, although I think the shaman would be more in tune with the grotto sub-level. But here with this temple area, you can have some interesting battles, many magical effects being used at the same time. Perhaps some of these statues within the temple activate, they animate, or they shoot some beams or lasers out of their eyes, who knows? It depends on the type of fantasy game that you are playing. And then you have a sub-level 3, which is the catacombs. This is perfect for undead, but also to place some traps. So maybe the player characters want to open all of these sarcophagi and coffins and raid the different tombs, and they start to activate some magical and conventional traps. Maybe the corpses within the different rooms seem to be harmless, and it is only when the player characters take a certain thing or open a certain room and they all start to animate, like you would see in some of the best old school Renaissance type of adventures. There are also some tombs that serve as teleport areas. That reminds me a lot of the graveyard in Waterdeep, if I'm not mistaken, that some of the tombs and crypts actually have like pocket dimensions and gateways and such. Then we have sub-level 4, the maze. Well, this is perfect for minotaurs. Perhaps you have like a band of minotaurs stalking these different sections of the maze, but maybe you can place some illusions here as well. Maybe to trick the players, maybe some corridors actually lead to a dead end, but maybe the corridor keeps moving forward, or maybe there is some sort of bend or T-section at the end, and there is an illusion that cloaks this particular section, and the players have a very difficult time trying to find their way out. This could be a place where the players could be in danger of suffering from starvation. If you have placed some sort of magical effect that prohibits teleportation or moving through walls, this could be a real danger for the players. Then we have sub-level 5, the jail. Maybe the players are captured and taken to this place, or maybe they need to rescue a certain non-player character or several non-player characters. This could be the perfect place for that. But this could also be handled in a very creepy and moody way. Maybe this is an abandoned jail, and the players, little by little, start to find out what happened to the different prisoners, why this jail is so deserted, and maybe there is some sort of unknown enemy or hazard waiting to happen as the players move through the different cells and the larger zones. Then we have the next sub-level, which is sub-level 6, the court. The court is a very interesting sub-level. Sure, you could handle it in a hostile way, populating the rooms with enemies and traps, dangerous magical effects, but I think this level is great to have a sort of respite for the players. Maybe they find a non-hostile faction living within this court. Maybe the players can find some supplies here, potentially help and allies, because if you're going to use level 10 of the Dungeon Under the Mountain as the final level, the hardest and most difficult and lethal level, it would be a great idea to have this sub-level as a place to restock and prepare for the final confrontation. Then we have the next sub-level, which is sub-level 7, the garden. The garden is a great level to place some druids. You could also place shamans, but it's also a great level to place some unusual non-player characters, like some mushroom men type of non-player characters, like the Myconids. Maybe they are a neutral faction. They could be enemies, they could be allies. And maybe the player characters can find some useful things to create potions, some sort of magical effect or ritual, because all of the plants here, maybe they can be used for that. You also have a secret network of tunnels under this garden. And maybe there is a mystery here. Maybe they find trees and bushes that only grow in the surface, and they find them here in this underground section. Or maybe this is actually a sort of terrace or open ground type of zone. Maybe they got here through a teleporter and they are amazed as to how they ended up here. Then we have the next sub-level 8, the dock. I think this is a great sub-level to connect with other waterways within the dungeon. There are other levels that have these dock type of areas or some pools and rivers, and maybe you want to modify the maps a bit so that they connect to this dock. This dock is highly useful to be used as a place that the player characters are going to assault or raid, or maybe there are non-player characters here and the player characters can negotiate with them. So no matter how you want to handle this outpost, perhaps as a base within the dungeon under the mountain, maybe the player characters have their boats, or maybe they are playing as different species that can swim really fast or move underwater without needing to breathe oxygen. I think this is one of the best places to be used as a general hub in the entirety of the dungeon under the mountain. At the end of the sub-level booklet, you have a grid, a completely blank grid with a space to write the number of the level, or rather the sub-level and the name. So this is very useful if you want to create more sub-levels for all of the other levels, but also if you want to expand level 10 or the same sub-levels that are included in this virtual box set. So what do I think of the Dungeon Under the Mountain level 10 virtual box set? I think this is an excellent box set, the perfect way to create the climax for the Dungeon Under the Mountain expedition. Depending on how often you play, they could last you for several years. The entire Dungeon Under the Mountain complex is just huge. It's titanic. All of those different rooms and corridors, with so many encounters, all sorts of violent and non-violent interactions that the player characters can have with the inhabitants. And it all depends on the main quest or purpose of the player characters. Why did they decide to enter this Dungeon Under the Mountain? Do they want to destroy some evil warlord within it? Are they just in it for the glory, the treasures, and the experience? Who knows? It all depends on your campaign. So whether you want to use just some sections of level 10 and the sub-levels, or the entirety of the dungeon complex, I highly recommend that you get the Dungeon Under the Mountain level 10 virtual box set. And I'm going to put a link in the description that leads to a playlist as recommended by one of my viewers, Radek. He asked if I could create a playlist with all of the different levels of the Dungeon Under the Mountain. I think that's a great idea, and I'm going to put that in the description so you can check out all of the other levels if you haven't seen them yet. Well, thanks for watching my review. If you have any comments or questions, please let me know. See you later.